G'day, Ebony. It's your favorite student, Jav here. I'm gonna try to make this quick and as enjoyable as possible because I understand you've got a fuck ton of these to do, and this must be boring. So it's probably the fourth question one you're doing. So let's get right into it. Obviously, I'm doing question one. That's not what I went to do. That's what I meant to do. Atkinson-Shiffrin multiple sort model, also known as MSM. I'm going to refer to that a lot. What memories are we talking about? Sensory memory, short-term and long-term memory, easily. What are the strengths? Well, it's set a very solid foundation. It's very influential. However, there are clear holes in this theory. It's oversimplified and it doesn't emphasize the intricacies of memories. And for a conclusion, well, you're just going to have to sit tight and wait and see. Notice this graph, this image that I put. It's very, I'll refer back to it later. That's where objectives. So what I'm going to be trying to say in my argumentative piece, well, I'm going to try and emphasize how, even though it was made in the 1960s and we've come so far in psychology and science, it's still very significant. It holds much historical importance as it paved the way for future psychologists to understand how the memory works. Many memory studies provide empirical evidence that there is a distinction between short-term and long-term memories. That's in terms of encoding, duration, and capacity. Henry Molaison, my favorite case study in this assignment, and how revolutionary it was and how it supports this theory. However, I can't be all guns blazing. I got to be reasonable here and talk about the many loopholes, plot holes in this theory. It's very there's unexplained limitations, and it's oversimplified. It's too linear. But we'll get into that at a later state. So, a recap. I know you know what the MSM theory is. I want to show you that I know, so I'll be very quick with it. Sensory memory goes to short-term memory, goes to long-term memory. You've got capacity, duration, and encoding. And just as a quick graph, I've got graph or table that's there. I'll move that for you. Hopefully you can see my camera and everything. And then the next one, and then there's the referencing for that. But yeah, essentially, how I referred back to the first slide, that's the image that I've shown, and it goes very linear. And the way we distinct and transfer is going through that loop. But yeah, let's get into source one. So source one is the Peterson experiment. Lloyd and Margaret Peterson aim to test the hypothesis that information is rehearsed, which is not rehearsed, is lost quickly from short-term memory. What that means, if you don't do that looping of retracing and re-getting those memories, you're going to lose it and it's not going to be set in the long term. They conducted a lab experiment of 24 participants and they had to recall trigrams, random three constant syllables such as TFY. The trigrams were presented one at a time and had to be recalled in intervals of 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15 and 18 seconds, respectively, for each trial. No successive trigrams were contained any of the same letters. After hearing the trigrams, participants were asked to count backwards in threes or fours from a specified number until they saw a red light appear. Then they recalled the trigram. This is known as the Brown-Peterson technique, and the purpose was to prevent rehearsal. Short-term memory actually had a limitation of 18 seconds when rehearsal is prevented. It is thought that the information is lost from the short-term memory from trace decay. The results of the study is also shown that short-term memory is different from long-term memory in terms of duration. Going back to that table, in the recap, you can see that there was different in the multi-saw model of memory, and this experiment backs that. The longer the interval, the less accurate the recall. At 3 seconds, around 80% of the trigrams were correctly recalled, whereas at 18 seconds, only 10% were recalled correctly. Now, HM's my favorite case. It's one example of biological evidence that short-term and long-term memory are located in different stores in the brain. So source one, different duration, different stores in the brain for source two. Henry Molaison obviously had amnesia because of he cracked his skull when he was younger, but he still had access to memories prior to his surgery. Neuroscientists had always thought that memories were monolithic, all of it essentially the same. It's stored throughout the brain. Milner's results were not only the first clue for the now familiar distinction between short-term and long-term memory, but each uses different brain regions. We now know that memory formations involve several steps. So if we go here, after immediate sensory data is temporarily transcribed by neurons in the cortex, as in I'm seeing stuff, it travels to the hippocampus where special proteins work to strengthen the cortical cortical synaptic connection. If the experience was strong enough, like I need to remember where my keys are, or recall it periodically, like, okay, I put my keys on the hanger. I put my keys on the hanger. I put my keys on the hanger. So it's constant. In the first few days, the hippocampus then transfers the memories back to the cortex for permanent storage. That way, if I lose my keys, where am I going to look for them? Immediately the hanger, because that's where I put them. So Henry Molaison's mind could actually form initial impressions without the hippocampus, the memory consolidation. They eroded like my social life after this fucking assignment. I pray to God I can swear. I think you're only seeing it, so it should be calm. But this is not the only memory distinction Milner found. In a now famous experiment, she asked Henry to trace a third star. In a reflection, I did my shitty one over there. You can see it. Bet you can't do any better. And just like anyone, they would fuck up this task. As you can see, I did. But after practice, this is my first attempt. I didn't practice anymore. Too embarrassed. He got better. That's pretty normal, right? Wrong. Unlike you and I, Ebony, you got to remember our Milner, no, not Milner, our Henry doesn't have a hippocampus, which means he has no memory of previous attempts. This is really interesting, as his unconscious motor centers remembered what his conscious mind had forgotten. What Milner discovered was that declarative memory, facts, dates, and names, is different from procedural memory, like learning how to ride a bike or signing a name. This is relevant, Ebony, this revelation, Ebony, is the reason why you can't remember every student's name. However, you can remember mine because I'm a sick cunt. But you can remember how the St. Kilda theme song goes, even though you probably haven't sung that in a long time. A cheeky fact, just for you, Ebony, because I like you, is that our Henry, 13 years after his surgery, actually experienced St. Kilda winning their first grand final, grand final in 1966 VFL series. I don't know how it feels when a literal case study that I'm talking about, my assignment, has experienced more Saint success than my own tutor. That's crazy. On to source 3. Well, essentially, one of the aspects that MSM has received the most criticism for was the idea that the maintenance rehearsal is key to transfer the information from short-term to long-term. Studying the role, we can see that Craig and Watkins reported that neither the length of the stay of the item in short-term nor the overt rehearsal in this item is subsequent for the recall of the item. However, it is not clear in the maintenance rehearsal it has no effect in memory in their criticism. The first is that, for 2 reasons. The first is that Atkins and Schifrin did not assume maintenance rehearsal was a unique control process for transferring information from short-term to long-term. Second, contrary to conventional wisdom, there is ample empirical evidence that maintenance rehearsal does create long-term memory traces. Just like if I were to remember a phone number with no distractions, if I continually repeat it, I'm going to memorize it much better. This is the quote that we base that distinction on from Atkinson and Schifrin themselves. Essentially, the subject is concentrating upon rehearsal and memorizing the phone number. The state and the information transferred would be relatively stronger if I had no interference. On the other hand, the subject may divert his effort from rehearsals to various coding operations, which will increase the strength of stored information. That's essentially if there's distraction, if my mum's in the room, etc., etc. Going on to the strengths and weaknesses. So I've got a bunch here. I honestly don't have the time, but let's go into it. So for source 1, it's essentially the most replicatable and reliable because of the standardized procedures, such as fixed timing. They eliminated noise and all other distractions. However, that's the trigrams one. However, there is low ecological validity. Like, there's no point. When do I remember trigrams? And it does not provide information about other stimuli such as pictures and melodies, only verbal communications. Source 2, Henry, you can't really replicate that because his brain was all messed up. And in fact, they underestimated how messed up his brain really was. However, a strength of that is that there was significant testing. Source 3, the subjective terminology hinders the debate, but references multiple sources arguing against critics. Overall, there's a firm basis of contemporary studies, and the model is supported by studies of amnesiacs such as Henry. But the weaknesses is that it's outdated information and it's way too simplified. Essentially, in conclusion, MSM is pretty on the money for the 1960s theory, setting up techniques and ongoing research to both agree and challenge Atkins and Schifrin beliefs. Contemporary theories poke holes and is easily point out flaws in the theory. However, in the same breath, our understanding of memory would not be the same if not for these influential scientists. Although rehearsal was initially described as Atkinson's and Schifrin's maintenance, rehearsal, repetition of information. Schifrin later suggested that rehearsal could be elaborative. That was in 2003. I know I went over, but please don't pin me. There's a reference thing. I hope you enjoyed. Get keen. Yeah, you know the vibes. Fuck, how do I end this? All right, there we go. Catch yous later.